Hello today. Today we're going to be translating equations and expressions. Our objective is to be able to translate verbal sentences into equations and vice versa. Vice versa means the other way as well. We have some different ways to say different operations in mathematics. So other ways to say plus are plus, increased, more than, sum, or total. Next up, we have subtract, difference, minus, less than, decreased by. The equal sign can be represented by the words is, as much as, the same as, equal to, equals, or equivalent to. Next up, we have multiply, times, product, of, percent. This can be changed to a decimal. We have divide, quotient, per, or ratio for a division sign. We can use parentheses with phrases like sum or difference to show that we have grouping. The other thing that we talk about is we have some turnaround words. These turnaround words are represented by the word than, or they can be represented by the word from. Also, if we see less than or greater than, that would represent a turnaround word as well. That basically means that whatever you say first actually goes at the end of your situation. We'll talk about that more when we get there. So for our first examples, what we want to do is we want to go from sentences to having equations. So what I always like to do is try and find an equal sign first. So our first example says twice the sum of 3 and k is the same as 12. So when I see the word is, I know is represents my equal sign. So I'm going to put my equal sign right here. So it says twice the sum of 3 and k. So what that tells me is I need to do 3 and k, but I need to take the sum of that. So the sum of 3 and k, so 3 plus k. But I don't just want that, I actually want twice that amount. So I'm going to put parentheses around that, and I'm going to multiply that by 2, because I want twice the sum of 3 and k. The right side, we have, it says the same as 12. So as 12, so 12 is what's going to be on the right-hand side. And now I always like to reread it to myself and make sure it actually makes sense. So twice the sum of 3 and k is the same as 12, and that makes sense. Let's look at our next one. 2/3 m is as much as 3 times the difference of 4 and p. So first thing is as much as is going to be our equal sign. So I make that an equal sign. So I'm going to go ahead and say equals. And then on the left side, I have 2/3 m. So that means 2/3 times m. So I'm just going to have 2/3 times m. That's this part right here, the 2/3 m. Next, I have 3 times the difference of 4 and p. So 3 times the difference of 4 and p. So I have the difference of 4 and p. So 4 minus p. And I'm taking 3 times that. So I have the 3 times right here. So I'm going to take this whole thing and say 3 times the difference of 4 and p. Let's look at our next problem. It says 7 times v subtracted from 102 equals 5. So first thing, I have the word equals, so that's pretty obvious where my equal sign is. So let's go ahead and look at the left side here. So I have 7 times v subtracted from 102. So I have 7 times v subtracted from 102. The first thing that I'm noticing here is I actually have a turnaround word. So a turnaround word basically means that you have to flip-flop the order the things go in. So instead of the 7 times v going first, I'm going to put the 102 first. So I say 102. And then from, subtracted from, tells me to subtract. And I have 7 times v. So 7 times v. I did forget to put my equal sign, but that's where my equal sign goes. And then the right side is pretty straightforward. It's simply 5. My next example is going to be 5 less than the product of 3 and a number is equivalent to 6 more than the same number. So is equivalent to, that's my equal sign. So I have 5 less than the product of 3 and a number. So 5 less than the product of 3 and a number. The less than reminds me that I have a turnaround word here. So the product of 3 and a number should be going first. So I'm going to go ahead and say 3, and a number can be represented by n or x or whatever you like. I like to use n for a number. Less than tells me to subtract, and 5 is what should be going there. I have my equal sign. 6 more than the same number. So I have 6 more than the same number. I do have a turnaround phrase here. I have more than. So the same number means I have to use that n again. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say the same number. So I have n. And then more than is adding. So I'm going to say plus 6. Let's go ahead and look at our next examples. So next up, we have a let statement. That's a short phrase written to explain variables and how they relate to the problem. Basically, what that means is we have to make sure that our letters actually represent something in the problem. So let's go ahead and practice those let statements. So we're going to continue doing the same exact thing here. We have a sentence, and we want to try and turn that into an equation. It says the temperature in Celsius is 5/9 times the quantity of 32 less than the temperature in Fahrenheit. So the first thing I have to do is figure out my equal sign. So is going to represent my equal sign here. And it says the temperature in Celsius. I don't really care about the temperature in Celsius, but I do care about that Celsius. So I have Celsius, which in this case I don't want to write Celsius out every time, so I'm going to let C equal Celsius. That is a let statement. So I'm going to say C equals, and then I have 5/9 times the quantity of 32 less than the temperature in Fahrenheit. So this gets a little bit difficult, but we have 5/9 times the quantity. So the quantity tells us that we have to add, or we have to do the 32 less than the temperature in Fahrenheit first in parentheses. So we're going to go ahead and put the parentheses there. And also you'll notice we do have a turnaround statement here. So it's the less than. So that tells us that the temperature in Fahrenheit has to go first. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say the temperature in Fahrenheit less than tells me to do a minus sign. And 32 is what that other number is. Now, once I have that quantity, I'm going to multiply that by 5/9. And the 5/9 just goes right outside of your parentheses. Now, the one other thing I have to do here is I do have Fahrenheit in this problem as well, so I have to write a let statement saying that F equals Fahrenheit. So let's look at our next problem. It says my first paycheck of the month covers my rent and my car payment. So we're going to go ahead and look at that. So I have my first paycheck of the month. So I have a paycheck, covers my rent and car payment. So the covers my is actually going to be your equal sign here. And you're going to say that your paycheck is equal to your rent and car payment. So let's let P equal our paycheck here. So P equals our paycheck. Let's let R be our rent. Let's let C be our car payment. Okay, now I can go ahead and write myself an equation. So I can say that my paycheck equals my rent plus my car payment. We're going to write a formula based on a verbal description here. So we have the volume of a sphere is equal to 4/3 times the product of pi and the cube of the radius. So we know that V, the volume of our sphere, is equal to, so that's our equal sign, 4/3 times the product of pi and the cube of the radius. So I know that the volume of my sphere has to equal 4/3 times the product of pi and the cube of the radius. So I'm going to go ahead and say 4/3 times the product of pi, which can be represented like so, and the cube of the radius. So I take the radius and cube it. Let's go ahead and look at our next example. It says the circumference of a circle is twice the product of pi and the radius. So the is our equal sign. We have circumference of a circle. So circumference of a circle, that's going to be C, is twice the product of pi and the radius. So twice the product of pi and the radius. So twice the product of pi and the radius. This time we're going to actually go from an actual equation to a sentence. It's a little bit easier here, so you just literally write it out in words. So I would say 16 minus 1/3 L is 13. And there's no real trick to these. All you have to do is imagine you're reading it out loud, and then you can simply write it down. So for this one, I would say 3/7 times the difference of x and 7 is 3 times x. Next up, we're going to go ahead and just remember what perimeter is. So how do you find the perimeter of any object? You add all sides. How do you find the area of a rectangle? You multiply base times the height. How do you find the area of a triangle? You multiply 1/2 times the base times the height. Let's go ahead and look at how to find the perimeter of this square here. So if we know that one side of the square is x plus 2, we know the other side has to be x plus 2 as well, and we know this must be 4x. So all we have to do is add all of our sides together. So we have 4x plus x plus 2 plus 4x plus x plus 2. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to count how many x's that I have. I have 4 x's here, I have an x here. I have 4 x's here, and I have an x here. All together, that's going to be 10 x's. And then I have a plus 2 and a plus 2, so that's going to be plus 4. So that's going to be the perimeter of that rectangle. The area is the base times the height. So I'm simply going to multiply my base, which is 4x, times my height, which is x plus 2. I can distribute that out, so 4x times x is going to be 4x squared. 4x times 2 is going to be 8x. That is how I get my area of that square. Let's go ahead and do the perimeter of the rectangle here. So I have to add all sides together, so I have 10c plus 6b plus 8a. None of those are like terms, so I cannot combine them at all, and I am all done with that problem. The area is 1/2 the base, which is 8a, times the height, which is 6b. So I can multiply 1/2 times 8 times 6. So 1/2 times 8 is 4. 4 times 6 is 24. And then a times b is just ab. Let's go ahead and look at our last example here. It says, let L be the length of the rectangle, let W be the width of the rectangle. It says the width of the rectangle is 7 less than the length. Draw and label a diagram to represent this situation. So let's go ahead and draw a rectangle. Okay. It says that the width of the rectangle is 7 less than its length. So if our length is L, we know we have our length minus 7 is going to be the width of the rectangle. So I've now drawn and labeled a diagram to represent that. It says the perimeter of the rectangle is 66 centimeters. Write an equation to represent the perimeter of the rectangle. So if I know the whole perimeter is 66 centimeters, I can say that 66 has to equal all of the sides added together. So I know I'm going to have L plus L plus L minus 7 plus L minus 7. Combining like terms, I can say that 66 equals, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 L's, and then I have minus 7 and minus 7. Minus 7 and minus 7 is going to be minus 14. So that would be my equation to represent the perimeter of this rectangle. That is all we have for today. Have a great day. I will see you guys in class.